Well, hey everybody, I'm out here at the Boring Company Hyperloop Plaza, and there's a lot of changes, a lot of activity in the few months since I've last been here. I'm also here for a tour of the Boring Company facility right behind me, and that will be starting up very soon. And I'm just really appreciative of this opportunity, and for the people of the Boring Company, especially Nick, Lisa and David, that reached out to me, offered me this opportunity, and are giving me the tour today. I'm just looking forward to seeing quite a bit of very interesting parts of the Boring Company facility, their operations, and hopefully learn a few pieces of information.
Now that several days have passed since I recorded that intro out at the site, I've had a chance to collect my thoughts, go through my notes, and put together a lot of the information that I learned that has everything to do with the design and philosophy that the Boring Company is using, also what they're doing as the development of the Prufrock 3, and also their future ideas. Now, part one is this video. Part two will continue the discussion over at Giga Texas, and I'll add some additional information about what's going on at Giga Texas and what we can expect in the future. Now, there were a lot of big developments that are going on here at the Bastrop site as well. But first, I thought I would just talk a little about how Boring Company came to be. And in 2018, it was spun off from SpaceX. And at that time, several people, engineers, and also the design philosophies that SpaceX has came over to the Boring Company, and you can definitely see that when you are out at the Bastrop site and talking to many of the engineers that work at the Bastrop site. Now, the Boring Company shares SpaceX's first principles approach. They also share the iterative approach to design, testing, and production, very similar to what we're seeing out at Starbase with what is going on with the Starship. And as I mentioned, when I was touring through the facilities and seeing what they're doing with production, design, and testing, it really did seem to mimic what we see down at Starbase. But let you hear from Elon back in 2018 when he was talking about establishing the Boring Company.
So yeah, we have a lot of SpaceX engineers that are either kind of working at SpaceX and the Boring Company or full-time at the Boring Company. And so we get to use rocket technology to build tunnels and apply some pretty advanced techniques to tunnel technology, which hasn't generally gotten a lot of love. So we're really taking world-class engineering talent, applying it to this problem, and seeing if we can make some headway.
The shared history that the Boring Company has with SpaceX is critical to understanding the approach that they are taking towards tunnel boring machines and the boring process. Now, here at the Bastrop, Texas site, a good starting point is the amount of acres that they own. It's about 600 acres, or about 242 hectares, although only 10 acres or about 4 hectares are being used right now. And you can see what the site looks like and the pasture on the top of the screen where most of the property is owned. Now, they also have created Hyperloop Plaza, which is a community center, offers a lot of amenities. It is open to the public, SpaceX employees, because there is a Starlink facility right across the street, and Boring Company employees as well. So this is a great community outreach program that the Boring Company started recently. Now, on the main property that is developed, we can see this purple Quonset hut. It's a sprung structure, and it means that it is a non-permanent structure, very similar to the tents that we used to see down at Starbase that SpaceX employed before they started building the Star Factory. And this serves as the Boring Company's maintenance facility here at the Bastrop site. Also visible in this image from my drone flight that I did a few months ago over the Bastrop site are several items that have been moved over to Giga Texas to support the tunneling operation. That is the grout tanks, trailers, and silos, belt cassette for the conveyor system, and also the Prufrock 3 tunnel boring machine thrust ring. And this is what it looks like at Giga Texas now. In the distance is the Boring Company production and test facility, also with new office mezzanines inside. We'll be spending more time covering this particular facility in more detail later in this video. Also visible on the right-hand side of the screen, highlighted in green, is liner truck lane, and this is another facility that we will go into more detail later in the video. Also in this image is one of the most important parts of this part of the site, and that is the production facility for the concrete liners that actually make the tunnel segments that allow the tunneling to proceed. Now, I've highlighted this area to show you the extent of what we're looking at. We can see completed tunnel liners on the left. We can see some of the concrete batch plant materials that are used to make the concrete. We see some of the red and blue molds to make the concrete liners and some other supporting machinery and equipment. Production of the liners brings up a larger issue that we need to discuss, and that has to do with the design diameter of a tunnel and how that is a major contributor to costs and the materials and also the complexity of the equipment and building of the tunnel. Now, the tunnel design and the size is directly related to how the tunnels will be used. Some can be extremely large, as you can see by the upper image on the right. Some can be very small, as the other image shows. But the larger diameter, generally speaking, the more material and the higher cost that will entail. Also, the larger diameter of the tunnel means more complex and heavier equipment and, of course, more cost to support that infrastructure. The larger the diameter is a more significant impact on the construction site itself and the environment, and that would be for beginning and ending the tunnel operation. Now, I would note that tunnels smaller than about 1 meter or about 3.5 feet in diameter are generally not suitable for tunnel boring machines, but they use horizontal drilling, and we've seen a lot of that over at Giga Texas in the last couple of years. So with all of these considerations in mind, the boring company has decided to concentrate on tunnels of approximately 14 feet or about 4.2 meters in outer diameter, and this balances the utility of the tunnels and the cost associated with building the tunnels. Now, the image in the upper right-hand side of the screen gives you an idea of some of the use cases for tunnels, everything from pedestrian to the vehicle loop that we see at Las Vegas, freight, bear, and also utility. The image on the bottom gives you some of the dimensions and how the tunnels themselves may be constructed. Now, this design choice that the boring company has made reduces the overall size of the tunnel, the weight, the complexity of the tunnel boring machine, and also the supporting infrastructure. It is an iterative design that will continue to explore additional methods to further reduce complexity and cost. And they do have a long-term vision in mind of off-world tunneling. So all of this plays a major role in the design considerations that the boring company has for the tunnels that they create. So with all of this in mind, let's take a look at the liners that are constructed here at the Bastrop site. The upper left shows you how the tunnel segments are put together to make each ring of the tunnel itself and then how they're joined together. In the bottom right, we can see the in-production liners on the upper left. On the bottom right are the completed ones with the rubber gasket around the perimeter. And we see some of those liner molds that we mentioned earlier in the video. And there are two different kinds of these molds, and we'll get into that a little more in the video later. Liners are a critical part of tunnel construction, so let's look at their design elements. The boring company uses liners that are 9 inches or 23 centimeters thick, 3 feet or about 0.92 meters wide. They have autonomous machine threaded lift sockets as shown, also called sprout holes, and autonomous machine alignment and stabilization sockets that are cast into the concrete of the liners themselves. They have recesses for bolts, and they also have bolt holes and threaded cast-in mounts, and this allows them to be joined together to make a ring. In addition to that, they have recesses around the perimeter for a rubber gasket, and this image shows how a installed perimeter rubber gasket would appear if it were on this particular display. Now, this is a good image also showing a different part of the liners that shows the dowel pin holes. This is what's used to align each completed ring to the next ring and is a critical part of making the entire tunnel structure. This diagram from a permit for a boring company tunnel gives you a good idea of how all these work together. The upper left, we see the dowel pins. And we also see in the top the bolts that hold each of the liner segments together. We see the rubber gasket. I've highlighted one of the 6 liners that make one tunnel ring, and I've also shown where the lift socket or the sprout hole is located when you look at the side view. Now this animation gives you an idea of how all of these are put together. You see the 6 liners coming together, being bolted together, and also as I show this, you can see how the dowel pins work to make each of the rings connect together. The Boring Company continues to use the iterative design process and first principles to try to make these liners better and more efficient. And one of the things they're looking at is reducing the thickness from 9 inches or 23 centimeters to 8 inches or 20 centimeters. This reduces a lot of the material that would be needed. It saves costs, reduces weight, and it also makes the automation equipment design and production easier. They're also looking at ways to fully automate the tunnel concrete liner installation process, which would include installing the bolts. So the design process continues while they are making tunnels even today. So now continuing to fly more towards the east so we can take a look at some other parts of this part of the site. Stopping here, we can see the Boring Company tool and projects shop. There's also a kind of an artificial grass area, and this is where they take photos for guests touring the site. Next to this area, highlighted in blue, is the Boring Company main offices. This is also where I went in to sign in to begin the tour. You see that brown kind of raised platform? I got a chance to stand up there and talk with both David and Lisa, and I had great views of this particular part of the site that we're stopping at. In the upper left, you can see the arrow pointing to the SpaceX Starlink building. This is a new facility and is where they build the terrestrial or the ground components of the Starlink systems. Now, we also see these yellow highlighted items. This was at the time I did my drone flight a few months ago. All of these items are now over at Giga Texas, and that would be the grout silos, the Proofrock 3 thrust ring, and the belt cassette. Also, you can see 2 different kinds of liner molds in this picture. The upper ones are the liner A molds is what I call them. They're red and they make one of the segments. And liner B in blue make another kind of the segments. And these make the rings for the tunnels. And speaking of which, there are 2 tunnels. These are both test tunnels. Test tunnel number 1 is for the hyperloop testing, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. And test number 2 is an incomplete tunnel not used at the moment. I'm going to reposition the drone to give us a better view of these 2 tunnels. We can see how they enter into the ground here. They proceed under the road that separates the SpaceX and the Boring Company facilities and emerge on the SpaceX side. As we stop here, I listed both of the tunnels and showed you more of the equipment, and this is a much better angle. And as mentioned, the test tunnel 1 on the right is the hyperloop test tunnel, and the one on the left is a completed tunnel, but it is unfinished on the inside and it is currently not being used. So what is the hyperloop? And that's a very good question, and it relates to the testing that they're doing here. Now, the hyperloop is an ultra-high-speed public transportation system that's envisioned to carry passengers and an autonomous electric pod of about 600 miles per hour. An example is a hyperloop trip from DC to New York would take less than 30 minutes, and from DC to Baltimore would take about 8 minutes. And it also helps keep you out of the weather, the environment, and generally can make the trip easier. It also has some applications to off-world transportation as well, particularly on Mars, and it might actually be easier there since the atmosphere is so low. And that brings up another point, is to make this work, the tunnel needs to be sealed and the atmosphere removed. And you can see on the bottom left image the tunnel that was done several years ago, and it was actually with the SpaceX logo because that was around the time when the Boring Company spun off from SpaceX. So the tunnel here at the Bastrop site is not very long, so they are not using this for high-speed testing. The purpose of this particular tunnel is to test the tunnel materials that would be used to manufacture them, and also the materials that are inside, and how do they work with a low atmospheric pressure scenario. And they've actually had some problems with things like asphalt because it outgasses and it causes problems with trying to keep that environment with a low pressure. They also use it to test various construction methods that they might use for the boring, tunneling, and the hyperloops. And with these 2 images, you can see that there are heavy steel doors on either side of the tunnel. This one is on the Boring Company side. On the SpaceX side, it's actually a white tunnel, but looks similar. They have vacuum seals, they have a vacuum pump house, and they're able to bring the atmospheric pressures down to almost 0 millibars, so very close to a full vacuum. Now over on the SpaceX side of the road, this is what the tunnels look like, and as I mentioned, there is a heavy steel door painted white for the Tunnel 1, the Hyperloop test tunnel. You can see the inset image as well. This shows how this tunnel is configured. It's kind of like the loop that you would see at Las Vegas with the roadway, and it could take vehicles. The other tunnel is the unfinished one on the inside. It's basically a bare tunnel, doesn't have a floor, doesn't have any other equipment, and is really not used at this time. You also see that green turnaround that allows eventually traffic to go from one tunnel to the other. Now, one of the highlights for my tour of the Boring Company was the fact that I got a chance to walk through Test Tunnel 1 all the way from the Boring Company side to the SpaceX side. And that was the first time I've been in a Boring Company tunnel, so that was really a special treat for me to be able to say that I've walked through that particular tunnel. So as we pull away from that section of the site, I'm going to stop here and just show you not only where I got my photo made with David and Lisa, but you'll note the snail on the bottom right of the screen. Now this is Gary the snail, and he provides an important performance metric for the Boring Company, especially with the design, development, and production of the boring machines. Now Gary has an average speed of about 0.03 miles per hour or 0.048 kilometers per hour, and the Boring Company is trying to develop the boring machines to beat that record and set a tunneling speed. And the process that it takes to get to that speed has been quite challenging. And they are looking for help with developing the technologies to do that. And they are hosting something called a Not a Boring competition every year here at the Bastrop site. They bring in teams from universities and in some cases businesses as well. They go through a competition and they try to see what new technologies are available to help develop more of the speed and the maturity of the proof rock system. And the next one's coming up next year, the 2025, at this facility. And you can see there's a registration sign up, and there's also a link if you are interested, or if you know anybody that's interested, you may want to check out that link. As I continue to pull the drone away in this direction, I'm going to stop and show you this display of a tunnel segment. And what we're seeing is an abandoned hexagonal concrete tunnel liner. It's put on display. This concept was originally being used, but they have now abandoned it for the current tunnel liner design. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but I've had some viewers ask about this in the past, and the answer is that this is an abandoned concept that they are no longer going to be using. I'll reposition the drone to the other side of the site, and we'll take a look at the main production facility. Now, I was not able to take photos on the inside, but I will give you a general idea of the layout of this facility. Now, on this end of the building, as I have highlighted, this is where they do the tunnel boring machine cutter head and soil testing. They have a rig very similar to this where they do different kinds of rock samples and they see how the cutter heads respond. And they use a small scale model of the proof rock cutter head for the testing. And interestingly enough, if you go to the Hyperloop Plaza Bodega, on the roof or the ceiling hanging down is this item, and this is actually part of that small scale model. So check it out next time you're here. Now let's continue the tour. I want to move over to this part with this red and white striped half tunnel segment and talk a little bit about what this is. It's called the liner truck lane, and it's used for testing of the liner trucks, and they use different tunnel configurations. As I mentioned before, here's a few of them, and they will set that up and then test how the tunnel liner truck works in each of the configurations and try to do some iterative design as well to improve the overall process. So I know that you're wondering, what is a liner truck? And that's a very good question. We happen to see them in operation over at Giga Texas. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see two of those liner trucks. They're kind of that red and white with the angled tires. They have some of the tunnel liners already loaded up and getting ready to drive into the tunnel. The bottom right shows you that these liner trucks are different than what we see in the rest of the industry because, one, they use those rubber wheels. They don't use rails. Two, they are fully electric. They even use Tesla electric motors and batteries, and they are part of the system that they are developing to try to bring complete automation to the manufacturing of the tunnel itself, the construction of the tunnel, and also by installing the liners without having people inside. And that entire concept of zero people in the tunnel we'll talk about in part 2. As we leave liner truck lane, we'll reposition to take a look at the main production facility here at the site. And this was constructed just under 2 years ago. And as I was told during my tour, that this is the only tunnel boring machine production facility in the United States. And they seem quite proud of that. I think that's a great accomplishment for the company. Now, the section that I have highlighted is the tunnel boring machine production portion of this building. It also has many CNC machines, tunnel boring machine jigs that hold the large sections of the machine as they are being welded. They also have welders, steel cutting, and fabrication sections throughout this area. They also have several locations along the middle part of the building that is open for work on the gantries, which is another part of the tunnel boring machine we'll talk about in part 2. On the end of the building, as we discussed before, this is where the cutter head and soil testing section is for the facility. In addition to that, part of this area is used for fitting out, test fitting, and trying out parts of the boring company's systems that are the logistical support for the tunnel boring machine. The section that I have highlighted here is the liner automation testing section, and this is a critical part for the overall planning of the boring company and the design and development of the future proof rock tunnel boring machines, and that is the fully automated capability of having the liner trucks bring the liners in, have them picked up, positioned, and installed, and then eventually secured together all automatically without people. And this is the part of the production facility that is developing and testing all of those technologies. As I was touring inside this facility, I noted that they were installing a mezzanine in this section that was using the vertical part of the factory to the best utilization. And I asked what it was, and this is all of their new offices, also where they do some of their designs and development work, and additional offices for the boring company. And this is a great use of the space, as this is a very tall structure, and by using the mezzanine and installing the offices inside, not only does it keep the people close to the production facility, very similar to what we see at Giga Texas, but it also puts all of these offices into an enclosed structure, which helps with the heating and cooling and the support for the people. On the ground floor next to that mezzanine office structure was this area that was basically looked to me like meeting rooms, other rooms, maybe a break room as well, possibly where they can do food preparation. But they also had several displays showing some of the tunneling projects that are underway, and also some live views into some of the active tunnels out at Las Vegas. So pretty interesting to see this facility. It probably is used for guests and visitors as well, because they can do all of those displays and multimedia in these rooms. And the final section is this yellow area on this corner of the structure. This was mostly warehousing, lots of shelving and storage for multitudes of equipment that are part of the tunnel boring machines themselves, but also part of the production equipment that is used periodically. So this is a vertical location with very tall shelving, and it is used for that purpose within inside this facility. So as we pull away from the main site for the boring company, I want to stop here shortly and give you a quick view of the Hyperloop Plaza Bodega. Again, I mentioned this is a community center open to the public and SpaceX employees and Boring Company employees as well. So good overall view of the entire site.
Well, I just got done with the tour of the Boring Company facility here at Bastrop, Texas, and I just want to say thank you very much to David and also to Lisa for giving me an outstanding tour. We were able to see quite a bit of the facility, where the tunnel segments are manufactured and what they look like here on the ground, some of their maintenance facilities. We also got a chance to see inside that very large warehouse, and it's also a giant production facility, which is really awesome to see. And many of the people were just really great to talk with, very energetic, very enthusiastic about their mission, what they're trying to do, and what's coming up in the future. So, you know, I was just really inspired by getting a chance to talk to those people and just get a chance to see firsthand what the operations are like, and just, you know, all of the work that they are putting into developing these systems. I did also get a chance finally to walk through a tunnel, and this is particularly the tunnel that was listed as the Hyperloop test tunnel, and it connects the Boring Company facility on one side of the highway or the roadway and the SpaceX Starlink facility on the other. And this is a Hyperloop testing tunnel, and they are doing various tests in here as well, and they are able to bring the atmospheric pressure down to a very low bar or very low PSI level for their tests. So it's you know, great to see how all of this works together, and again, hearing from the people that are actually doing the work here, what it is like and what they are trying to do. Now, I did learn some information that I'll be able to pass on later on. There's some other information that I won't be able to pass along, but needless to say, the work that is going on here and the plans for the future for the Boring Company are very bright. They are hiring. They're looking for some additional people to help them out here at the facility, particularly in the production area. And so if you happen to have certain skills that the Boring Company could use, even if it's skills that aren't directly related with the Boring Company, but are related to manufacturing, welding, structures, I'm sure that they could use your help out here at this facility. And make sure you take a look at the Boring Company careers site and see what openings are available. And finally, you know, the work that is continuing on at Giga Texas is making progress. And one of the things I did learn is that the purpose of that tunnel is partially as a test for the Prufrock 3. And that is one of the reasons why the progress isn't as fast as some people would have liked. And that's because this is really the first time the Prufrock 3 has been used in a commercial environment. They're using this tunnel as a test of all of the equipment and how the Prufrock 3 works, plus some additional strategies that they are testing as well. And ultimately, we will see this tunnel underneath the road connecting over to the main factory. And then we'll see after that what the future holds for additional tunneling operations at Giga Texas and elsewhere. So anyway, great information, great opportunity. I'm really honored that I got the chance to come out and tour this facility. And as time goes on, I'll try to use the information that I'm allowed to pass on over at my Giga Texas videos as we see more of the progress with the boring tunnel at that facility. So that'll bring to close this particular video summarizing my tour here of the facility. Again, thank you very much to the Boring Company, to David, to Lisa, and also to Nick for arranging this opportunity. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your progress, not only here and at Giga Texas, but at future sites as well. So thanks for watching. Take care.
And don't forget to check out part 2. This is where I cover Giga Texas, but I also continue the discussion about the Boring Company design criteria, the work that they're doing on the proof rock tunnel boring machines, and also what we can expect to see over at Giga Texas. So make sure you check that out.